Community partnership with the Ozarks held its Housing Collaborative's legislative panel discussion. 8 local representatives and candidates discussed their plans to address how to preserve affordable housing in Springfield. Each panelist was given time to address specific areas of focus of affordable housing at the state and local level.
The goal was one, to better understand the views and the positions of folks who are running for office, but also an opportunity to share the work that the Housing Collaborative does and offer an educational platform for any representatives that are interested in learning more about how they can address the issue in our community.
The panelists included Missouri House Representatives Bishop Davidson, Stephanie Hine, Bill Owen, and Melanie Stinnett, along with candidates for the House, Derek Nolan, Jeremy Dean, Leslie Jones, and Ashley Cossins.